You know, it's a really jarring experience to go on vacation and enjoy the last couple of days of my summer and being off the internet for a couple of days and then coming back and watching the entire Call of Duty community burning down to the ground, or at least that's what the internet would have you think, as the reception to the reveal of Black Ops 7 has been very controversial, to say the least. We've got another Infinite Warfare situation on our hands. So I posted my video shortly after I went to Treyarch after I played Black Ops 7, and then I kind of disappeared from the internet for a couple of days. I took a little bit of time off just to enjoy the last bits of my vacation, but it seems like I missed a lot because when I came back, not only was there a lot of doom posting about Black Ops 7, but also Call of Duty made a massive announcement in regards to the structure of the game that is actually a really big deal, and we'll talk about why that is. But I wanted to come on here today and have a bit more of a reasonable discussion about what exactly Black Ops 6 is right now and what the state of it and the decisions they've made. We can cut through a little bit of the doom posting and also maybe criticize some of the things that maybe deserve to be looked at again. So a lot of the people that are heavily criticizing Black Ops 7 right now have not even played the game, and the only reason that we're really not allowed to share a lot of details about what we played at Treyarch is because the build that we did experience is really subject to change, right? A lot of the stuff that we played is likely going to be heavily altered or maybe not even going to appear at all in the final build, because that's just kind of how game development works, right? They're tweaking and altering stuff and trying to find the right balance of these things, and much of what we played is probably not reflective of the final product. So that being said, I do think that there is still room to be skeptical about something that you haven't played yet, but as somebody who's played the game at least, without sharing a whole lot of details, I do want to give my unique perspective on what I think about the state of Black Ops 7 and specifically a lot of the big decisions they made lately. So we're going to talk about the campaign, the multiplayer, and zombies, and really figure out, is this game as cooked as the internet wants you to think? All right, so firstly is the game setting and time period. Now, this is actually where I feel it differs from Infinite Warfare, where I don't think that a whole lot of people are immediately against Black Ops 7 inherently just because of the time setting. Black Ops 7 takes place in the slightly distant future, just like BO2 did when that game released. It takes place in obviously 2025, where we are now. This game is in 2035. However, back in Infinite Warfare, I do distinctly remember a lot of people were fatigued with the futuristic era, but we haven't had a futuristic Call of Duty in actually quite a long time. So if anything, I feel like this would be slightly refreshing to have, as, you know, it's a bit different from the modern setting or even the World War II setting. The reason I bring this up, because if you're trying to determine what people are upset about with Black Ops 7, if you're looking at the time period inherently, I don't think that is really a strong argument here, because if anything, it should be kind of a refresher at this moment in time. Whereas Infinite Warfare, I can understand people having future fatigue, and even myself, I was a little bit over it because we had 3 games in a row like that, but this has not been the case with Black Ops 7. So what I'm saying is, I don't think it's inherently the time setting that people are upset about, but maybe it's the contents of the game. So if it's not that, then what could it be? Maybe the campaign? Well, you could look at the campaign from a number of different ways, which we'll do so. You can look at the campaign from the perspective of the new gameplay stuff they're trying, or what they're inherently doing with the story. If you've seen my Black Ops 6 video, I was openly very critical about the Black Ops 6 campaign. It really wasn't one of my favorites, and that was primarily because I felt like it didn't really take any meaningful risk that the Black Ops campaigns have always done in the past. It didn't really feel like Black Ops to me for that reason, and also I didn't really find the new story particularly compelling. The narrative of the Black Ops 7 campaign is supposed to tie the stories of Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 6 together, meaning that there is a canon ending to the BO2 story, and of course a lot of the stuff that was set up in BO6 will likely be answered or expanded upon in this game. The thing that I'm really hoping for is that they take some kind of massive risk, either within the narrative, the tone, or even the gameplay, and it seems like, at least in that department, they've made some major strides. I'm actually intrigued about this endgame stuff for the campaign, because I feel like it has a lot of maybe what the Black Ops 3 campaign tried and failed to do, but maybe they're able to pull it off here. And I remember saying in my Black Ops 6 review that I felt like that campaign, despite its lacking story, had the best campaign gameplay I've ever played, and I still hold true to that to this day. The Black Ops 6 campaign, just from a gameplay perspective, is fantastic. It just needs a really good, compelling story to go along with it. This is where I feel like they're going to really have to step up to the plate, because the recent Black Ops games, just from a writing and narrative perspective, haven't been as powerful as they've been in the original games. And honestly, I think a lot of that has to do with how long Black Ops has gone on. When they made the original trilogy, Black Ops 1, 2, and 3, they had the the narrative ability to go wherever they want with the story and the timeline. But now with Call of Duty being this giant amalgamation of itself, and like the Treyarch and Infinity Ward timelines crossing over to one another, there's all this like canon they now have to adhere to, and they're really boxed in by the already established Black Ops canon that they really can't do a whole lot creatively inside the context of the time period of the story. They can try to make characters interesting within these bounds, but that's really about it. They don't have the freedom to go in any kind of crazy direction they want to anymore, which is probably why they're not able to push boundaries like they used to back in the day, because Black Ops is so constricted now. And also, if you watched my Black Ops 6 video, I sniffed out the fact that they were working on BO6 and 7 at the same time before they officially announced that, but they told us that they actually developed these two games pretty much side by side, and that comes with a lot of its own positives and drawbacks. But one of the positives, I think, is that a lot of the gameplay mechanics and systems and just fun things that they implemented into BO6 gameplay-wise are going to be in Black Ops 7, and they're probably going to be expanding on a lot of those things. We've already gotten some little details about the campaign. There will be sort of like build crafting. You can have your own soldier abilities. It's a co-op campaign again, and so from that idea, I think that the gameplay, you have nothing to worry about. I do think it's going to be solid, and I'm looking forward to playing it. One of the drawbacks, however, is that they don't really have time to course correct of what has already been made, and especially if they were making it side by side with BO6, they probably did it with similar techniques. And one of the things that I heavily criticize in my Black Ops 6 review is that I'm really sick and tired of the, formula of mission, big cinematic, mission, cinematic. I loved the idea of keeping the player in the game, even in some of these moments that aren't action-packed. There are times where the player needs to feel immersed, and I think the cinematics can be very effective when used in the right context, but for the most part, I would prefer them to opt in for like more gameplay sequences instead of cinematics. A lot of these moments could just be you, the player, experiencing the stuff, and I think it would go a long way into making the story feel more immersive and powerful, but at this point, it is probably too late to massively correct on that. So I can certainly see why some criticism might be warranted there. I think best case scenario for the campaign is that we get a really solid, fun co-op experience with a lot of great gameplay stuff. At this point, I have no doubt that the gameplay stuff and those sequences in the linear portions of the campaign are going to be awesome. They kind of already proved that with Black Ops 6, and their big risk this time is the end game, which is like an entirely different game mode on its own, where you actually build craft, you take on a lot of this end game content, get rewards, try to survive and escape, with your gear and all of the XP that you've gained. So that sounds like its own little thing that is definitely a risk, and that's kind of the Black Ops spirit that I felt was missing from BO6. Whether this endgame thing works out or not, I don't really care. I just applaud them for at least trying it, and we'll see if it works out. The best case scenario for the story is that we get something compelling within the confines of this game, because I'm not really counting on it just being powerful because of its ties to the Black Ops universe. I think a lot of the stuff with Menendez coming back is obviously, there's more to it than that. I don't think he's literally back personally. We'll see. I mean, in the Black Ops 3 Codex, it literally says he's dead, which I still believe is the canon ending, but we'll have to wait and see. Either way, I just think that they need to do a lot of heavy lifting to make this inherent story interesting with these characters, and it's definitely possible, but it's going to be a task. I'm willing to go into this one with an open mind because I honestly prefer a lot of like the weird stuff that the Black Ops campaigns do. I generally prefer them to the Modern Warfare stories, even though I think they're very solid. I've just always had an affinity for the way that Black Ops tells stories, and hopefully that they tell it like a Black Ops story this time instead of like a Modern Warfare story that I felt like BO6 did. But either way, completely regardless of the old characters from BO2 coming back, it's an interesting premise to begin with, and I'm excited to see where the direction of this story goes. So that is to be determined. I'm willing to go in with an open mind, but we'll wait and see what happens. I want to talk about the massive announcement Call of Duty made when I was literally on the last day of my vacation. I was in the airport when I saw this stuff, so you can imagine my shock when all of this was going down. So essentially what happened is Call of Duty announced that Carry Forward, which was originally announced to be taking place for this game, is no longer happening. Now, to begin, I think it makes sense that they initially wanted to do it, especially given that Black Ops 6 and 7 were developed at the same time. You remember the whole thing of Modern Warfare 3 was a DLC to Modern Warfare 2? It's not quite that simple, but it's not entirely false either. They were developed around very similar time frames, similar settings, you name it. But Black Ops 6 and 7 are quite different in many ways, and most of it being that the settings of the game are very different. Black Ops 6 takes place in the 90s, whereas BO7 is in 2035. So to have a lot of carry forward stuff from the game already doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it's a lot more complicated than that. But I think generally speaking, this was a great move for Call of Duty to make. The initial community pushback when they announced carry forward was happening was that, oh, the game is going to have this really solid identity and it's going to look cool for all of the first season, or basically the launch until season 1. And as soon as season 1 rolled around, when all of this carry forward content was supposed to be added to the game, then you would see Beavis and Butthead and Ninja Turtles running around again, which obviously wouldn't bode well for the game trying to maintain its identity, which Call of Duty outwardly said we're trying to do better at. And so canceling carry forward and making sure that these operator skins and even weapons don't come over, I think is great for a game. But to make a case for why, I have to separate all of those things individually. Skins are different from weapons, which are different from content. So firstly, with skins, I think that is kind of self-evident. I think that just inherently will help the game feel more grounded in its setting. And this is under the caveat that Activision doesn't go crazy with future operator skins, right? If we can avoid having the insane, silly stuff from the Black Ops 6 multiplayer, then the game will feel like Black Ops 7 for longer. And if they avoid their worst impulses and just including some absolutely insane things that will obviously hurt the identity of the game for longer, then you can maintain that sense of immersion that I think is so important. I brought up Battlefield 6 a little bit, or if you watched my review on that game, I was mentioning how it's the little details that can make or break immersion, and Battlefield 6 really succeeded in that way. I found myself more immersed in that game than anything in quite some time in the FPS genre because it committed to its aesthetics and ideas, where that can be so easily shattered with just a couple of decisions. So removing carry forward and preventing these silly BO6 skins from immediately coming over is a good thing, under the guise that they will maintain that with the Black Ops 7 skins and try to be really careful about what they're adding to the game and what it looks like. Now, I saw some counterpoints to this saying that, oh, but shouldn't the skins that I either bought or earned in a certain thing carry over to the next game? Like for Zombies, guys, you earned an Easter egg skin on a map. Shouldn't that carry over to the next game? No, I don't think so. I'm a big proponent of what's in Black Ops 6 should stay in Black Ops 6. If you earned an Easter egg reward skin on Liberty Falls or Terminus, that is for that map. It's for that game, and it shouldn't be in Black Ops 7, right? That's a commemorative, piece of honor, this badge that you did something and you achieved a goal in Black Ops 6. It shouldn't mean anything in Black Ops 7, given that they're new games. Now, of course, that probably wasn't the intention from the start, and COD HQ doesn't really, foster this. I would really prefer if they do away with COD HQ as soon as possible. Now, I would actually be in favor of carry forward if Black Ops 7 was a Black Ops 6 DLC, and the line between what is DLC and what isn't is kind of blurry, but if they're gonna call it Black Ops 7, this was my argument with Modern Warfare 3, if they're gonna call it a new game, it needs to be a new game, and part of that is not having stuff from the old game carry into the new one, because it really muddies the waters, and, skins is a part of that. That's a big thing with operators, but also the weapon pool. I'm really glad the weapon pool of Black Ops 6 isn't coming to BO7, because not only would it not make sense, but it would take away from the effect and the specialness of what the new Black Ops 7 weapons are. You remember when they did the carry forward from Modern Warfare 2 to Modern Warfare 3? That was at least a little bit less jarring, because MW3 was literally took place like 15 minutes after Modern Warfare 2, so it made sense to have those guns in there. But again, at least as far as multiplayer goes, they were all pretty much pointless because they were outdone by the MW3 weapons. They weren't as competitively viable. They just, had better counterparts in the MW3 newer guns, so you didn't really ever use them at all. They didn't need to be there. I never really understood the utility of carry forward, and I certainly don't understand it from BO6 to BO7. I don't think it should carry forward, especially the weapon pool. That goes for multiplayer and zombies. Black Ops 7 MP already has a load of new content that should be focused on. There's over 30 weapons. There's like 16 6v6 multiplayer maps. There's already quite enough new content to chew on that we don't need to muddy the water with Black Ops 6 weapons and that point. And again, as soon as like live service hits, then there's going to be even more weapons for Black Ops 7. So no carry forward in that way, I think, is great. It's really a quality over quantity issue. And this is great for Black Ops 7 because now it will have the chance to shine with its own new content and will be doing its own thing from the perspective of its weapon roster, its mechanics, its perks, etc. Like, I think there's something to be said about a Call of Duty game being made for a certain kind of person. There are games like Ghost that I don't really care for. I will never actually like that game. It's not for me, not one of my favorites, and never will be, more enjoyable to me than some of my favorites. But there are some people out there that are diehard about that game. Every single game in the franchise is like that, where it might not be for me or it might not be for you, but it's for somebody out there. And I think that's why Call of Duty always succeeded, is because even if it wasn't made for everybody, it was made for somebody, and trying to make the game for everyone, inevitably you make the game for no one. Just look at all the bundles and cosmetics in the store of Black Ops 6, and I'm like, this stuff isn't for me. I'm not the target audience for this kind of thing. I am the target audience for a really authentic, identifiable multiplayer experience that Call of Duty was always known for. And I think like catering to those people that have been with the franchise for a very long time, that, have a certain affinity for that kind of thing, would definitely pay off in the long run, and making sure that those players feel like they're heard is big. I think people are going to really like Black Ops 7 multiplayer just from the perspective of the gameplay when it does come out for everybody, and that's also given that they be really careful about what they add cosmetic-wise and how they go about doing it. And I also think that, they go so far and they go to these painstaking depths to establish an identity and an art direction. And imagine you're an artist that works really hard on finding a certain tone for the game, and then all of a sudden that goes right out the window whenever Beavis and Butthead get added. It's like, that must feel really bad. So hopefully they can kind of actually maintain it this time, and that would be ideal, at least for me. And I have no doubt that the core gameplay of the Black Ops 7 multiplayer is going to be solid, because I've really enjoyed the Black Ops 6 multiplayer, minus all the cosmetic stuff, and I really enjoyed Cold War even minus the kill streak system. So I feel like they still have it dialed in, what makes a multiplayer fun and a COD arcade shooter enjoyable. So I just feel like they have to be very careful about what they do post-launch. That is really going to decide it for me, if they're able to keep it or if they drop it later on. But let's talk a little bit about zombies, because this is really kind of what I'm here for. Some of you might have seen Mr. Waffle Waffle's video where he talked about a Q&A that we had with Treyarch, and it was pretty much just him and I asking the devs questions in regards to zombie stuff. And again, it's stuff that I genuinely want to know, want answers for, and it's a unique opportunity for me to be a mouthpiece for my community and ask them stuff or provide feedback on things that the community would like. And one of those things that we talked about was new systems for the game. This is something that I was really hoping for, because with every single iteration of Black Ops Zombies, they've always changed stuff, and there's always been essentially new epochs between games. The Black Ops 1 engine is very different to BO2, is very different to 3 and 4. These all took massive risks in the gameplay, changed a lot of things, and, again, that's kind of what spawned the whole discourse of COD Zombies. In fact, it's kind of the whole reason this community is still alive, is because we're still talking to each other. We have discussions about what maps are better than one another, what games are better, why is Black Ops 3 considered the best, why is Black Ops 4, why did it stumble a little bit, is Der Eisendrache the greatest map of all time, no, it's Zetsubo, that's underrated. It's these discussions that we have in multi-hour long reviews, documentaries, map analysis, and so on. It's this dialogue that we always have about the game that really keeps it alive. The problem that I initially felt with Black Ops 7 is that I was worried that there aren't going to be a whole lot of major system changes from Black Ops 6. It's not going to give us a whole lot of differentials to talk about that will make this game feel different than its counterpart. And I had this thought when I was flying home the other day. Have you noticed in modern COD Zombies that we don't really get outstanding or really bad maps anymore? We don't get something like Transit, which, is kind of ironic because that's kind of like what the launch map of BO7 is, but you get my point. We don't get a Transit that is universally agreed upon to be an objectively bad map in BO2. Also, we don't get something like Shadows of Evil, which is so boundary pushing and so masterfully crafted that, granted, it's not going to be for everybody, but for the people that like it, like myself, that is my favorite map of all time, and I have a hard time thinking that will ever be dethroned. That map really does it for me. And again, other maps that I might not really like in the past, like Zetsubo, that might be somebody else's favorite map. And I noticed that in the modern era of COD Zombies, we don't really get that gradient anymore. All of the maps are just consistently pretty good. There's nothing absolutely outstanding in a bad or good way for one reason or another, and I think I figured out why. It's because in old Zombies, they used to make new systems to fit maps, but in modern COD Zombies, they make maps to fit their already built systems. Just as a little example, if you look at the Black Ops 1 maps, all all of those have a very different problem and solution for the player to solve. For example, in Call of the Dead, you have George Romero. It's this boss zombie that is very unique to everything else, that follows you around constantly and that you can't really kill easily. You need to really wear out his health, and he will come back indefinitely. Even if you kill him for a little while, you'll get a small reward, but he will always be back. That presents a challenge where camping is not really a viable option anymore. Or if you go to Shangri-La, you now have to contend with the fact that monkeys will spawn in to try to steal your drop. So you can't manipulate the drop cycle as much. You have to be very careful about how you maneuver around that map. Or even in Moon, right, you have the astronaut, you have the excavators that kind of cut off parts of the map. And again, these aren't perfect either, and they might not be for everybody, but they're all these systems that are individually made for those maps, where in modern COD Zombies, we have the same crafting table on every map, we have the same field upgrades, perks, you name it. And every map more or less has the same solution to Pack-a-Punch, minus some small variations where either you might need to like shoot these crystals or, you know, open this crate, do this thing. Like it's all kind of the same from that point of view, but the way that the maps in the new era of COD Zombies, particularly BO6 and Cold War, differentiate themselves is the map's wonder weapon and its main quest. Otherwise, the maps are basically the same, just a slightly different layout. And I think that is inherently a little bit of a problem because there aren't any opportunities for a map to really do something incredibly unique or something really bad either, which, you know, again, is why they're all consistently pretty good. Don't get me wrong, there are some standouts here and there though, like Citadel des Morts is a very solid experience with some unique ideas going on. Even The Reckoning, the final map in BO6, did some pretty interesting stuff with basically having two different paths that you can take the quest and two different boss fights that you can choose to interact with. Now, these have their own criticisms that I have of them, but by and large, it's a really interesting idea for a zombies map, and I think presents a lot of neat things they could do with that idea in the future. With that being said, you kind of get my point, I think, that all of the maps play very similarly because they sort of are the same. And I think where carry forward could actually be a good thing here for zombies, insofar as it's limited, is someone on Twitter, Expert Fusion, he essentially suggested that they could do something like what BO3 did, where some of the zombie weapons like the Olympia or the MP40 or something like that could be map exclusive weapons in BO7. That's a way to still utilize those guns from BO6, but also make them in a way that feels more special than just dumping the entire roster on there. And so I use that moment to really try to push for having unique systems or perks or features or even buildables on certain maps that don't appear anywhere else, because when you homogenize the entire gameplay loop, then no map really feels standoutish. And it also kind of sucks because it kills the dialogue that we as a community have on these maps. The only real way to differentiate them are essentially their wonder weapon and their main quest. But if you take that out of the equation, the maps are more or less identical copies of each other with a different aesthetic and different layout, which isn't nothing, granted, but I think that when it comes to BO7, they're really trying to push the idea that we're going to have very unique settings inside of the Dark Ether, right? Like all of these maps are going to be very wild and different, and I just think to really drive them home, if they had wacky and wild gameplay to go alongside it, could go a long way into making these maps feel special. Because if it's largely just BO6 systems, I mean, I think they'll work. The thing is, I like the formula that Black Ops 6 Zombies has. I've said that from the beginning, and I still feel like it's the reason they keep these systems and the gameplay that they do have is because largely it works. And admittedly, for the most part, it is fun. Maybe high rounds aren't necessarily my favorite in these systems, but just the act of fighting zombies, training a little bit, shooting things, it feels good in here. And I think that they have a very solid foundation that they have in number one in Cold War, but really expanded upon it in BO6. But I would like to see them take some swings with a couple of these systems in BO7, or at least try to do some things to make the individual maps feel different to one another, because BO6 struggled in that department in my eyes. All I can say right now is that if you liked Black Ops 6 Zombies, I'm very positive you're probably going to like BO7 Zombies. And a lot of the feedback that I personally gave to Treyarch is that, like, you know, you can keep this foundation, but please try to expand upon it and do some things that make the maps feel more distinct from one another and add special features that maybe take us a little while to learn. Something like Afterlife was very different for us zombie players at the time Mob of the Dead released, and they've iterated on it in stuff like Shadows of Evil, right? Without it feeling derivative, and I think they have so many opportunities to do that for this next game. And that was essentially what I told them. There are a lot of valid reasons to be somewhat skeptical about Black Ops 7, I'll give you that, but I think the internet has blown a lot of these out of proportion, and it's not quite as dramatic as it's made to sound, in my opinion anyways. And I hope I was able to provide a little bit of context on this stuff and just have a bit more of a reasonable discussion about all of this. And I'm looking forward to playing Black Ops 7 when it comes out. I'm also going to be playing Battlefield 6 when it comes out. Those games are not replacements for one another for me. I'm going to be playing both, and I'm going to be enjoying both. But as you know, with live service games, how they launch can be very different to how they end up at their final seasons, and so that's why I like to wait for live seasons to come around and see how the game behaves in its long-term lifespan, because if it's able to maintain the identity that it's going to launch with, which is admittedly a very cool identity, if they can hold to that to the end of the year, I'm going to give them massive props. However, if they turn around and, instead of doing the carry forward thing, they just add all kinds of crazy goofy skins that completely break the immersion of Black Ops 7, then it's like, well, at that point they may as well just went through with carry forward, because that was the whole point of it to begin with, was to maintain the identity. But I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt this time, because that was a massive decision for them to make, and I'm sure it wasn't made lightly, but it is still to be determined if they can hold true to that. So we'll wait and see on that. But let me know if you guys think that Black Ops 7 is cooked. Let me know if you're excited for it, and I just wanted to give a bit more of a reasonable discussion about the entire thing and just my perspective on all of it. So anyways, thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe for BO7 content, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.